Nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know. Pema Chodron. That line lands like a bell in the silence, doesn't it? Because what you're living through right now isn't just change in the casual sense. It's collapse. The old you, the identity that once felt like home, is unraveling at its seams. And if you've been sensing disorientation, emptiness, or even the quiet hum of possibility beneath the chaos, that's not coincidence. That's quantum law in motion. Think of your former self as a structure built to contain a certain level of energy. It served you perfectly until it couldn't anymore. Now that vessel is shattering under the pressure of frequencies it was never designed to hold. Quantum physics teaches us that particles collapse into form when observed, but identities collapse when consciousness outgrows them. That's the threshold you're standing on. This isn't about losing yourself. It's about the dissolution of patterns too small for who you're becoming. The discomfort you feel is not evidence of failure, but the signal of emergence, like a butterfly liquefying in the chrysalis. It looks like death from the outside, but within, the blueprint of wings is forming. The old you dissolves because the new you requires space. You can't carry both identities forward. They vibrate at different frequencies, orbiting different timelines. So the collapse is not punishment, not destruction. It is the prelude to expansion, the necessary breakdown before the breakthrough. The question isn't whether the old you will, fall away. It already is. The question is whether you'll resist or whether you'll let the collapse become your passage into the unknown brilliance waiting ahead. And now, as the silence after that threshold moment settles, we lean into the question, what is really happening? When the old you collapses, science has its language. Spirituality has its poetry. But both point toward the same mystery. Identity follows the same laws as matter itself. Quantum mechanics describes particles existing in superposition, multiple states at once, blurred into probability, until an observation snaps them into a single form. Your identity isn't much different. Versions of you, the confident one, the anxious one, the visionary, the survivor, all hover in potential, coexisting in the quantum field. But when your awareness fixes on one version, when your habits, emotions, and thoughts reinforce it, that becomes your reality. That version crystallizes. It feels solid. It feels like you. Yet here's the paradox: just as particles can decohere and reorganize, so too can the self. When your consciousness expands through experience, crisis, awakening, or sheer exhaustion of old patterns, the resonance keeping your identity stable begins to falter. Scientists call it decoherence. In your life, it feels like confusion, instability, like the ground beneath your feet dissolving. Old strategies no longer work. Familiar roles no longer fit. You try to cling, but the grip fails because the very frequency that held that identity together is disintegrating. Imagine a star reaching the end of its cycle. Its gravity collapses inward, crushing itself until it explodes into a supernova. From destruction, new worlds are seeded. Identity collapse follows the same choreography. The old self implodes under the weight of new frequencies, and the debris becomes raw material for the next version of you. What looks like breakdown is the first act of breakthrough. This is why the collapse often feels so sudden. One day, life feels tolerable, predictable, secure. The next, you're standing in rubble, unsure who you are or what you want. That shock isn't random. Quantum transitions happen in leaps, not gradual slopes. Your consciousness jumps configurations, like an electron shifting orbits around a nucleus, sudden, precise, irreversible. And just like electrons emit light when they leap, you too radiate energy during collapse. Others may sense it without understanding. Some will be drawn closer, others repelled. It isn't personal, it's physics. You are broadcasting on a frequency the old identity couldn't access, and not everyone can tune in. So when you notice your desires shifting, when your nervous system feels electric, when the goals that once motivated you now feel hollow, understand this. It's not failure. It's evidence that your consciousness is reorganizing. You are undergoing what physicists call a phase transition. Water doesn't improve itself into steam. It must destabilize, pass through turbulence, and emerge as something qualitatively new. Every collapse follows this rhythm coherence, destabilization, reorganization. It mirrors nature's cycles. Forests burn so soil can renew. Seasons die so new growth can bloom. Your identity is not immune to the laws written into the cosmos. You are the cosmos, folding in on itself, rewriting its own pattern through you. And here's where surrender enters. You cannot hold back the tide of collapse any more than you can hold back a wave with your hands. Resistance only deepens the turbulence. But when you let the wave carry you, you discover something extraordinary. Collapse isn't destruction at all. It is the field of potential reordering itself into higher complexity, into a more expansive you. The mechanics of collapse are not just abstract theory. They are the intimate experience of your confusion, your disorientation, your inexplicable urges to shed what once felt essential. They are the biology of your brain rewiring itself, the energy of your body resonating at new harmonics, the reality around you reshuffling to match. So when the old self crumbles, remember it is obeying the same universal laws that guide every star, every atom, every spiral of life. You are not breaking down. You are obeying physics. You are fulfilling the pattern of collapse that every form undergoes when it is ready to evolve. And if you can trust that, then even in the rubble, you'll sense the hum of new worlds forming, worlds that are not distant galaxies, but the uncharted dimensions of you. As the old self shatters, what comes next isn't immediate clarity. No, between collapse and emergence lies a wilderness, a liminal expanse I call the void. It's the space where one identity has dissolved, but the new one hasn't stabilized. And if you've been here before, you know the feeling: groundless, disoriented, almost as if you've been erased. At first, the void feels terrifying. The ego interprets it as death. No familiar signposts remain. Goals feel hollow, habits fail, even your own inner voice grows quiet. It's like standing in a pitch-black room after a bright light has gone out. But what looks like emptiness is actually pregnant with potential. Quantum physicists describe the vacuum state, the place where particles flicker in and out of existence, where nothingness conceals infinite possibility. The void in your life functions the same way. Think of the chrysalis. The caterpillar doesn't simply grow wings on top of its old body. It dissolves into formless soup. Total disintegration precedes flight. That soup state, that neither this nor that existence, is the void. And though it looks like annihilation, it's the rawest canvas of creation. This is why confusion often accompanies transformation. Your old reference points have been stripped away, and your nervous system scrambles to find coherence. But if you can resist the urge to bolt back to the familiar, you'll discover the void has its own intelligence. It slows you down, interrupts your compulsions, and strips you of borrowed identities so that only authenticity survives. The void is also where synchronicities multiply, because without the noise of the old self's agenda, you're more permeable to subtle guidance. Dreams intensify, intuition sharpens, symbols appear in ordinary places. It feels as if the universe is whispering, because in truth, you've become quiet enough to hear. Here's the paradox. The void is both the most disorienting and the most creative phase of collapse. You cannot rush it. Just as you cannot force a seed to sprout before its time, you cannot demand your new identity to appear on command. What you can do is hold space, cultivate trust, breathe into uncertainty, learn to sit with the silence that terrifies the ego but nourishes the soul. In this in-between, time itself feels strange. Days blur, memories surface out of order. Future visions flash without context. That's because the linear scaffolding of your old identity has collapsed, leaving you suspended in a non-linear field. It's unsettling. Yes, but it's also the birthplace of reinvention. Think of the void as a cosmic rehearsal room. Here, multiple versions of you wander across the stage, trying on lines, testing costumes. You're not locked into any of them yet. The final script hasn't been chosen. You are free to explore, to imagine, to sense which version resonates deepest. But beware the temptation to cling prematurely. Many rush to define themselves again, to seize the nearest identity just to escape the discomfort of not knowing. But that shortcut carries a cost. You end up recreating an old pattern in new clothes. True transformation requires patience in the soup, in the silence, in the uncertainty. The void is not a punishment. It is the womb of becoming. Every collapse leads here. Every rebirth emerges from here. And the longer you can breathe into its mystery, the more authentic and expansive the self that eventually crystallizes. So if you find yourself drifting, unmoored, without answers, take heart. You are in the most sacred part of the journey. The void is not evidence that you're lost. It's proof that you're dissolving into possibility, preparing to be reborn as someone your old self could never have imagined. As the void stretches open, you begin to notice something remarkable. Collapse is not just an abstract shift in awareness. It ripples through your very biology. Your body is not a bystander in this process. It is the stage, the vessel, the living instrument through which quantum transformation plays its music. Consider your nervous system first. When identity destabilizes, the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches, the gears of fight, flight, rest, and repair must renegotiate their dance. Old rhythms collapse, new ones attempt to emerge. That's why during profound shifts, you may feel surges of adrenaline for no reason, sudden fatigue, or waves of trembling energy coursing through your limbs. These aren't malfunctions, they are recalibrations, as if your wiring is being upgraded to handle higher voltage. Brainwave patterns follow suit. Neuroscientists speak of neuroplasticity, how neural pathways dissolve while new ones spark to life. During collapse, you may feel foggy, forgetful, or strangely disoriented. That's your old networks pruning themselves. Simultaneously, new connections are forming, mapping fresh possibilities for perception and behavior. What feels like mental chaos is often the mind's architecture reorganizing itself into higher coherence. The electromagnetic field generated by your heart and brain amplifies these changes. Research shows that your biofield extends several feet beyond your body, carrying information about your emotional and mental states. When your old identity dissolves, the frequencies broadcasting from you shift, sometimes dramatically. People might react differently without knowing why, drawn closer, or inexplicably pushed away. You're not imagining it. Your field has changed. Even your endocrine system, the glands secreting the chemicals that shape mood, energy, and motivation, joins the reconfiguration. Old hormonal rhythms that maintained your previous personality begin to destabilize. Sleep patterns alter, appetite changes, emotional responses surprise you. It feels as if your chemistry no longer belongs to you. But in truth, it is adjusting to match the new baseline of who you are becoming. Think of your body as an orchestra. Under the old self, it learned a score, repeating the same notes predictably. Collapse is the moment that score is ripped up. Instruments fall silent, then clash, then slowly discover a new harmony emerging. What feels like noise is actually the rehearsal for a symphony more expansive than before. Energy sensations often accompany this. Tingling in your hands, pressure in your forehead, warmth in your chest, chills down your spine. These are the signatures of electrical recalibration. Many dismiss them as random, but viewed through the lens of quantum identity shift, they are evidence of your body aligning with a frequency your old self couldn't sustain. And here lies the profound truth: your body is not resisting your evolution. It is cooperating. Every cell contains receptors tuned to consciousness. As your awareness shifts, genes switch on or off. Proteins reconfigure, DNA folds differently. Epigenetics reveals this flexibility. Your biology isn't fixed. It is responsive, adaptive, evolutionary. This is why collapse can feel like illness, yet no diagnosis fully explains it. You may feel feverish without infection, exhausted without cause, euphoric without trigger. These are upgrade symptoms, not malfunctions. Just as a computer freezes briefly during an operating system update, your body pauses, glitches, then restarts with expanded capacity. But remember, cooperation matters. Fighting your biology, denying your symptoms, or pathologizing them unnecessarily can prolong the turbulence. Gentleness, hydration, rest, breath, nourishing food. Time in nature becomes the way you partner with your body's quantum upgrade. In truth, your body is the most honest witness of collapse. It cannot lie. It doesn't cling to identities the way your mind does. It simply resonates with the frequency you embody. When the old you destabilizes, the body doesn't argue, it rewires. It remembers that it is a living quantum antenna designed to tune into higher fields of coherence. So when your heartbeat flutters, when your muscles ache, when your skin buzzes with inexplicable electricity, don't mistake it for malfunction. See it as evidence. The instrument is tuning itself. The body is preparing to play a new song, the one written not by the old self, but by the emerging self who is already waiting to be born. By now, you've felt how collapse reshapes your biology, but perhaps even more startling is how it rewrites your emotional landscape. Because when the old self dissolves, the emotional patterns that held it together dissolve as well. At first, this feels chaotic. Moods swing wildly. One moment you're elated, the next you're drowning in despair. Tears arrive uninvited, irritation flares without cause. Old sources of comfort suddenly feel hollow. You begin to wonder, am I breaking down? But pause, look closer. These aren't random storms. They're data streams, carrying precise information about what's dissolving and what's emerging. Fear is often the loudest. It grips you in the void, whispering worst-case scenarios. But fear here is not your enemy. It is a compass. It points to the edges of identity, where expansion is pressing through. Every tremor of anxiety is evidence of the old self losing ground. When you learn to breathe with fear instead of battling it, it transforms from paralyzing wall to doorway. Grief follows closely. Not always grief for people or events, but grief for yourself, the version you've outgrown. You may miss the familiarity of your old identity, even if it was limiting. Grief honors the death of what once served you. Letting those tears fall is not weakness, it is ritual. It clears the inner soil for new seeds to take root. Confusion, too, becomes sacred. The ego hates not knowing, so it calls confusion failure. But in collapse, confusion is proof that you've stepped beyond old maps. It means you're navigating terrain the old you couldn't comprehend. Instead of resisting, what happens if you lean in, if you let confusion be the teacher of curiosity? Then there is anger. Anger erupts when boundaries crack, when patterns once tolerated become unbearable. Many try to suppress it, but anger in collapse is fuel. It burns away complacency, forcing you to speak truths long silenced, channeled wisely. It becomes fire for transformation rather than destruction. And let's not forget joy. Yes, joy often slips in through the cracks, startling you. Moments of awe in the simplest things: sunlight on a wall, laughter that bubbles up without reason, sudden peace in the middle of chaos. These flickers are not distractions. They are previews of the new identity's baseline evidence that lightness will return once the reorganization completes. So the emotional chaos of collapse is not random. It is orchestration. Think of it like a storm cleansing the atmosphere. Lightning cracks open the sky, rain purges the dust, and afterward the air feels alive, electric, renewed. Your emotions are doing the same, purging the debris of the old identity while fertilizing the soil of the new. But here's where choice matters. Will you judge your emotions? Or will you listen? Every emotion carries a frequency and a message. Fear says something larger is calling you. Grief says honor what is passing. Anger says reclaim your truth. Joy says this is alignment. Resisting these messages only prolongs collapse. Listening to them allows the process to complete more gracefully. Because emotions are not obstacles to transformation, they are the transformation. They are consciousness in motion, energy reorganizing itself through your body and psyche. Even shame and guilt, the emotions most people avoid, become doorways. In collapse, shame often reveals the places where you've mistaken borrowed identities for your own. Guilt highlights where your actions no longer align with who you're becoming. Painful, yes, but also liberating. They show you exactly what to release. The key is to stop labeling emotions as positive or negative. In collapse, they are neither. They are currents of energy moving information through you. When you learn to ride them rather than resist them, they accelerate your evolution. So, the next time your chest tightens, your stomach flips, or your eyes flood without warning, remember, this is not breakdown. This is energy in motion, identity reorganizing. The storm will pass, and when it does, the air inside you will be clearer, your inner climate more alive, your emotional horizon more expansive than ever before. As emotions surge and subside, another revelation begins to surface. Your relationship with time itself is unraveling. Collapse doesn't just reorder your body and emotions, it bends your perception of past, present, and future until the familiar scaffolding of linear time dissolves. The old self lived by the clock, past behind, future ahead, present squeezed in the middle. That rhythm gave stability, it kept identity intact. But during collapse, that structure falters, memories resurface out of order. Déjà vu multiplies. Dreams feel more real than waking life. You catch glimpses of futures you haven't lived yet, and they feel as tangible as the ground beneath your feet. This isn't madness, it's physics. Quantum theory shows that particles aren't bound by linear time. They exist in superpositions, where past and future states blur until observation anchors them. Identity works the same way. The old you experienced life in sequence. The emerging you begins to sense time as a field. All possibilities coexist, and your awareness chooses which path to collapse into experience. Think of it like standing at a river delta. Countless streams branch outward, each representing a potential timeline of your becoming. The old self believed it was stuck in one narrow channel, But collapse sweeps you back into the confluence, showing you that you can flow into entirely different waters. This is why, during profound transitions, you may feel reality speeding up or slowing down. Hours vanish in minutes. A single moment stretches into eternity. These distortions reveal that your consciousness is loosening its grip on the linear model, slipping into what physicists call non-local time. Past, present, and future interweave. Guidance from your future self becomes possible because, at the quantum level, that self already exists. Notice the synchronicities that cluster in these phases. Chance encounters, repeated numbers, uncanny alignments. They are not coincidences. They are intersections, points where different timelines brush against one another. Collapse thins the veil, allowing you to sense these crossings more vividly. It can be disorienting, even frightening, to feel your old sense of time unravel. The ego panics, because without linear time, it cannot measure progress or control outcomes. But if you lean into the experience, something extraordinary emerges: freedom. You realize you are not bound by the past, not condemned to repeat it. Every moment becomes a portal into new probability streams. This is why breakthroughs often feel sudden, as if you've leapt into a parallel universe. One day, an old pattern seems unbreakable. The next, it has no hold on you. That leap is a quantum jump, a reconfiguration of your trajectory across timelines. The collapse doesn't slowly shift you. It moves you in jolts, in leaps, in moments that defy explanation. Even your relationship with memory changes. The old self relied on memory to anchor identity. This is who I've been. Therefore, this is who I am. But collapse scrambles that archive. Certain memories fade, while others intensify. It's not random. Your consciousness is pruning experiences that no longer serve your evolution, while amplifying the ones that contain codes for your next phase. And here's the gift: as linear time loosens, presence deepens. Without clinging to past or grasping at future, you discover the eternal now, the only place where transformation truly happens. It's in this now that you sense the hum of infinite timelines waiting to be chosen. So when your sense of time fractures, when the days blur, when déjà vu repeats, when visions of the future sneak into the present, don't dismiss it. You are not losing your grip on reality. You are loosening your grip on one version of it. Collapse is revealing what was always true. Time is not a straight line. It is a field of possibilities. And your consciousness is the compass that decides which reality you step into next. As time itself begins to loosen, another structure destabilizes your relationships. Because when identity collapses, the networks woven around that identity inevitably shift. The people who resonated with your old frequency may no longer match the frequency of your becoming. And this is one of the most tender, disorienting aspects of collapse, realizing that bonds, once inseparable, may unravel, while unexpected connections suddenly ignite. At first, it feels like loss. Friends who once felt like home no longer understand your language. Conversations skim the surface, and attempts to go deeper fall flat. Family members may resist your transformation, clinging to the version of you they depended on for their own stability. Partners might sense you slipping away, not because you love them less, but because your orbit is changing. This is not betrayal, it is resonance. Relationships are like chords, vibrations that harmonize when frequencies align. When your identity collapses, your note changes. Some chords dissolve, others form. The discomfort arises not from failure, but from physics. You are simply vibrating at a frequency that no longer matches what once was. But here's the nuance: not every relationship ends. Some stretch, adapt, and reorganize alongside you. These are the rare bonds that recognize your essence beneath identity. They might struggle to understand, but they choose to grow with you. Such connections deepen profoundly during collapse. Becoming anchors in the storm, professional relationships shift too. Careers built around your old identity may feel misaligned, like costumes that no longer fit. Colleagues sense the mismatch. Opportunities dry up. Ambitions that once fueled you lose their spark. This isn't failure, it's completion. Collapse clears space for work that resonates with the emerging self. A vocation aligned not with survival, but with authenticity. Even your environment responds. Places once comforting may suddenly feel suffocating. Rooms grow heavy, cities feel foreign, nature calls louder, or perhaps entirely new landscapes whisper your name. Because environments, too, are relationships' fields of resonance between your inner frequency and outer space. When identity collapses, those fields reorganize. It can be lonely. During collapse, you may feel surrounded by people yet profoundly unseen. That loneliness is not punishment. It is the echo of transition, the silence between one song ending and another beginning. And in that silence, new companions begin to arrive, people who resonate with the self you are becoming, not the self you've been in. They appear in synchronicities, through chance meetings, through whispers of recognition that feel fated. The challenge is to release with grace. When a relationship fades, the temptation is to cling, to force continuity. But forcing only breeds friction. Collapse invites you to trust resonance, to allow connections to dissolve or deepen according to the intelligence of frequency. Some relationships will return later, retuned. Others will complete permanently, serve the purpose of evolution. And here lies the deeper truth collapse teaches you, that relationship itself is fluid. You are not defined by who stays or who leaves. You are defined by the authenticity with which you show up in each connection. When you embody coherence, relationships naturally reorganize around that coherence. So, if bonds are fraying, if careers feel empty, if familiar places weigh heavy, know this: it is not the end of belonging. It is the reconfiguration of belonging. The old networks must dissolve so that new constellations can form around the frequency of your emerging self. And when those new constellations appear, they will not feel forced. They will feel inevitable. They will feel like recognition, like a note that finally harmonizes with the vibration you've carried all along. Collapse is not the death of connection. It is the birth of resonance, teaching you that every relationship, whether ending, deepening, or beginning, is part of the great choreography of your becoming. As relationships reorganize and constellations shift, another frontier opens your creativity, because when the old you collapses, the channels through which you express yourself collapse as well. And what emerges is not just a slightly altered style, it is a fundamentally different current of creation, flowing from dimensions the old self could not access. Under the old identity, creativity often carried the weight of performance. You wrote, painted, sang, built, or solved problems in ways that matched who you thought you had to be. Your output reflected conditioning, what was safe, what was rewarded, what was familiar. Collapse shatters that scaffolding. Suddenly, the brush won't move the way it used to. The words feel foreign, the strategies fall flat. At first, this feels like a loss of talent. In truth, it is the pruning of imitation, clearing space for authentic voice to surface. Think of language itself. During collapse, the vocabulary of your old self begins to feel stale, inadequate, too small to contain what you're sensing. New words, rhythms, even metaphors begin to rise unbidden. You catch yourself speaking differently, emphasizing differently, reaching for imagery that once felt strange. This isn't affectation. It is consciousness groping for new forms to match its expanded perception. Art takes on similar shifts. A painter may suddenly crave new colors, new mediums. A musician may abandon old genres for sounds that mirror inner frequency. A writer may move from neat essays to free-form verse. Creativity mirrors collapse. It dissolves old rules and reorganizes expression into patterns that feel truer to the emerging self. And creativity here isn't limited to art. Every choice becomes creative. The way you dress, arrange a room, cook a meal, solve a problem, each act becomes infused with a new signature. Collapse strips away mimicry and forces originality. You discover yourself inventing without trying, improvising in ways that surprise even you. This phase can be exhilarating, but also vulnerable. The old self sought external validation, applause, likes, paychecks, approval. The emerging self feels drawn to create for its own sake, to express truth regardless of reception. At first, this can feel risky. Will anyone understand? But the more you surrender, the more you realize creation aligned with authenticity carries resonance that no external formula can replicate. It may not please everyone, but it will reach the ones who are ready to feel it. There's a deeper current here too. Collapse often awakens transpersonal creativity, art that feels channeled from something beyond personal memory or skill. Archetypes surface, patterns repeat, symbols flow through your work as if carried by invisible hands. You may write words you don't remember forming, sing melodies you've never heard, sketch images that feel ancient. This is not imagination gone wild. It is the field of consciousness expressing itself through you. Now that your old filters no longer block the signal. In practical life, this creativity reshapes vocation and service. Careers rooted in conformity may lose meaning, while new paths open that allow expression of your authentic gifts. You may feel pulled toward teaching, healing, storytelling, invention, entrepreneurship, avenues that channel your creativity into contribution. Collapse doesn't just ask you to reinvent yourself. It asks you to reinvent your offering to the world. And here's the beauty: this creativity doesn't drain you the way the old patterns did. The old self created from effort, striving, pressure. The emerging self creates from overflow. Expression becomes nourishment rather than depletion. You don't push ideas out, they arrive. Flow. Insist on being born. So when your old forms of expression dissolve, don't panic. Don't assume your spark is gone. Recognize that you're in the chrysalis phase of creativity, the silence before a new voice, the blank canvas before a new palette. The collapse is not taking your art from you, it is birthing an art that matches the true frequency of your being. And when that expression stabilizes, it won't just feel like your creativity, it will feel like the universe itself. Painting, singing, speaking through you, authentic, unfiltered, alive. As creativity finds new channels, another frontier begins to reveal itself, your relationship with abundance. Because collapse doesn't only dissolve identities and expressions, it dismantles the very frameworks through which you understood prosperity, security, and the act of shaping reality. The old you often equated abundance with accumulation, money earned through effort, success achieved through competition, security purchased through control. These paradigms worked within the bandwidth of your former identity, but collapse shakes them to their core. Suddenly, old strategies stop working. Hustle feels hollow, chasing outcomes feels exhausting. What once generated stability now produces friction. This isn't failure, it's evidence of reorganization. Collapse forces you to recognize that abundance is not a pile of resources, It is a frequency of resonance. Just as particles align with observation, resources align with consciousness. When your awareness shifts, so too does your relationship with flow. You may notice synchronicities, multiplying opportunities arriving through unexpected channels, people offering support at just the right moment, doors opening without force. The old self calls this luck. The emerging self recognizes it as resonance. You're no longer creating reality by pushing matter around. With effort, you're shaping it through frequency. Consider the radio analogy. The old self strained to broadcast on a static-ridden signal, trying to reach outcomes through sheer volume. The emerging self tunes into a clearer channel. Suddenly, the message transmits effortlessly, and what once required struggle now arrives through coherence. This doesn't mean collapse eliminates effort, it refines it. Effort stops being frantic striving and becomes aligned action steps taken in harmony with the frequency you're embodying. The difference is palpable. Old effort drained you, aligned effort energizes you. One feels like swimming upstream, the other like catching the current of a river that already knows its way to the ocean. Abundance in this phase also transcends money alone. It shows up as time opening where there was none, as inspiration flooding in after drought, as relationships nourishing rather than depleting. It is the felt sense of enough, radiating outward into every corner of your life. Money becomes one thread in a larger tapestry, not the whole fabric. But here lies the challenge. The ego resists this shift, conditioned to equate worth with productivity. It panics when old methods collapse. It whispers that you're irresponsible, unrealistic, naive. Yet every collapse requires faith, not blind faith, but embodied trust in the physics of resonance. When you embody a new frequency, the field reorganizes to match it. Reality has no choice. This is why periods of scarcity often accompany transition. Not because you're failing, but because the old structures of support are dissolving while the new ones haven't fully crystallized. It's the gap between identities, expressed through resources. The temptation is to regress, to scramble back to familiar methods. But collapse invites you to hold steady, to trust the intelligence of resonance long enough for the new streams of abundance to appear, and they do appear, often more gracefully than the old self could imagine, because the field is vast, infinitely creative, endlessly resourceful. It organizes not through struggle, but through alignment. When you attune to that, abundance begins to feel less like something you chase and more like something you are. This shift also transforms your sense of manifestation. The old self tried to attract outcomes visualizing, affirming, forcing reality to bend. The emerging self recognizes manifestation as selection. All outcomes already exist in the field. Consciousness simply chooses which one to experience by embodying the frequency that matches it. Creation becomes less about asking and more about allowing, less about forcing and more about tuning. So when money dries up, when strategies collapse, when security unravels, don't assume you're failing. Recognize the pattern. Collapse is teaching you that abundance is not an external chase, it is an internal frequency. And as you stabilize in that awareness, reality responds. Not always instantly, not always predictably, but always coherently. You are not losing abundance, you are discovering its true source, the resonance of consciousness itself, reorganizing matter to mirror your becoming. By now, you've walked through collapse of identity, the void of uncertainty, the rewiring of body, the storm of emotions, the unraveling of time, the reshaping of relationships, the awakening of creativity, and the redefinition of abundance. What remains is the weaving together, the integration, because collapse isn't a one-time event. It is a spiral. a rhythm of dissolution and renewal that will accompany you for the rest of your evolution. Integration begins when you stop treating collapse as an enemy and start recognizing it as a teacher. Every breakdown becomes an invitation to deeper coherence. Every unraveling points to a higher pattern waiting to emerge. This is why mystics, scientists, and sages across cultures echo the same truth in different words. Life is not static. It is dynamic equilibrium, constantly reorganizing itself toward greater complexity. Think of the Fibonacci spiral, the sacred geometry found in seashells, galaxies, hurricanes. Each curve builds on the last, not repeating but evolving, expanding outward in endless possibility. Your identity follows the same mathematics. Every collapse is not the end of the spiral, but the widening of its arc. Integration means learning to dance with this rhythm. Instead of resisting uncertainty, you lean into it. Instead of clinging to old patterns, you let them dissolve when their frequency no longer matches. Instead of fearing collapse, you anticipate it as the sign of a new threshold approaching. You become fluent in the language of becoming. This fluency shows up in small ways. You notice fear rising, but you pause before reacting, recognizing it as a doorway. You feel grief, and instead of numbing, you honor it as completion. You watch synchronicities multiply and allow them to guide you, rather than dismissing them as coincidence. Life becomes less about control and more about cooperation with the intelligence of the field. Integration also means cultivating practices that sustain coherence. Breath, movement, stillness, expression, presence. These become your anchors, not as rigid rituals, but as living reminders of alignment. They help stabilize the nervous system, tune the biofield, and create spaciousness for the new self to land. Without them, collapse feels like chaos. With them, collapse becomes ceremony. And yet, the most profound part of integration is humility. Recognizing that you will never arrive at a final, fixed self. Every stabilization is temporary. Every identity is provisional. To live integrated is to live porous, to allow consciousness to reorganize endlessly, to embrace the truth that you are not a noun but a verb, not a destination but a process. This realization liberates you. You stop demanding certainty from yourself and others. You stop measuring worth by stability. You stop fearing change as loss. Instead, you see collapse as liberation, the field's way of making room for miracles. Integration also reframes service. You realize your transformation is not only personal. Each time your identity collapses and reforms, you broadcast new frequencies into the collective. Your coherence ripples outward. Your courage to dissolve becomes permission for others. Your authenticity becomes an invitation. You become simply by being, a catalyst for evolution beyond yourself. So integration is not about finishing the collapse. It is about remembering that collapse itself is part of the endless becoming. Every ending is a beginning. Every void conceals a seed. Every identity is a temporary constellation in the infinite field of your consciousness. The old you collapses so the new you can emerge. The new you will eventually collapse so an even truer self can be born. And on it goes spiral after spiral, expansion after expansion, the infinite play of consciousness, discovering itself through you. This is the essence of integration, to live not as someone who has finally arrived, but as someone who has finally understood that arrival was never the point. Becoming is the point. Collapse is the way. And your willingness to embrace both makes you not broken, not lost, but aligned with the very mechanics of existence. And so, we arrive at the soft landing, the quiet shore after the storm. You've walked through the mechanics of collapse, the void, the rewiring, the timelines, the shifting constellations of your life. You've seen how every unraveling hides a seed of renewal, how every dissolution is also an initiation. The temptation here is to rush back into certainty, to grab hold of the next identity and lock it down. But integration whispers otherwise. Rest, breathe, allow. The new self doesn't need to be forced into place. It will crystallize naturally, like dew condensing on morning grass, when the atmosphere is ready. The truth is, collapse is not failure. It is the universe removing walls too narrow for your spirit. It is consciousness returning you to fluidity, reminding you that you are never finished, never fixed, never confined to a single version of yourself. What feels like loss is the womb of expansion. What feels like ending is the prelude to becoming. So when you feel the ground shift again, and you will remember this rhythm, fear may knock, but it no longer has to own you. Grief may rise, but it can be honored as holy. Confusion may swirl, but within it lies infinite possibility. Collapse is not the enemy, it is the doorway. As you step into the next unknown, do so gently. Trust the spiral. Trust the intelligence humming beneath the disorientation. Trust that every breakdown is clearing space for a self more aligned, more coherent, more radiant than before. You don't need to force the future. You don't need to cling to the past. You need only to meet the present with openness, knowing that consciousness itself is carrying you forward. Collapse is not the end of you. It is the liberation of you.